Jason here. We're back for another episode of Museum Moments. Today we're going to take a look at some of our iconic Dreadnought guitars. When most people think of an acoustic guitar, I think the Martin Dreadnought comes to mind, and this is the guitar that started it all, the Ditson D111. In 1916, Martin started building special guitars for their largest company, the Oliver Ditson Corporation. And they just happened to want a guitar that was bigger than anything that was built before. Prior to that, Martin had built a guitar for a performer from Hawaii named Mikia Kealakai. It was larger than a triple O, and Ditson wanted something similar, but in their special shape. So Martin built this guitar, and they weren't quite sure what to call it. And since it was World War I era at the time, and the largest warships were the HMS Dreadnoughts from the British Navy, Martin decided to borrow that name for the guitar. The Martin D28 is the go-to guitar for so many famous musicians throughout the history of popular music. And this happens to be the first D28 ever built. It was built in 1931, and the reason Martin started building the Dreadnought under their own name was originally they had only built it for Ditson. And then Ditson went out of business, and they decided to start selling it under the Martin name. And so they came out with the D1 and the D2, which were very similar to the D18 and D28. And eventually, a little later in 1931, they just started stamping D18 and D28 on these models. This guitar was owned by the actor Richard Gere, who had a very extensive collection of musical instruments, and we acquired it through an auction. Through the first couple years of production, Martin Dreadnoughts really didn't sell that well, but that all changed in 1934 when Martin changed the way they were building Dreadnoughts and gave them the 14-fret neck to body joint like OM models at the time. And part of the reason was the neck was more comfortable to play, you had access to more frets, and just the tone of the guitar and the volume was what they really wanted at that time. And it just turned out to be the perfect guitar for those genres of music and then pretty much everything else going forward. This is a 1937 D18, and for some reason, 1937 is a great year when it comes to collecting Martin Dreadnoughts. Some of the most highly sought after D18s and D28s were built that year. When it comes to Martin Dreadnoughts, the D45 is the holy grail. The most collectible acoustic guitars are pre-war Martin D45s. There were only 91 built before production was stopped because of World War II. The first D45 was built in 1933 for Gene Autry. It was a little different than the guitar I'm holding. This is our 1942 model that's in our museum. His guitar was the larger 12-fret body and the slotted headstock, but it did have his name in pearl on the fingerboard and just pretty much set the standard for the very high-end guitars that D45s are. Now, when you see one of these come up for sale, a pre-war D45, they're usually well into six figures, so the chance of any of us owning one is very slim, but just to be able to have one on display in our museum, we think, we're very fortunate to have it. The newest members of Martin's Standard Series are Style 35 guitars. They've been around since the 1960s, but it just goes to show how long our other styles have been around. And what makes Style 35s different is they have three-piece backs. Where this comes from is in 1965, Brazil placed an embargo on the export of rosewood from their country. So you could no longer get Brazilian rosewood in the size that Martin needed for backs. So instead of just throw away the smaller pieces that they had available, they decided to build a guitar with a three-piece back, and the guitar they came up with was the D35. In addition to the three-piece back, it's also different from other Dreadnoughts in that the top has 1/4-inch braces instead of the 5/16 that are found on styles 18, 28, and 45. So many musicians play Martin Dreadnoughts because of the volume and tone you get from those guitars. They feel it is the perfect sound for whatever music they want to make. It doesn't really matter the genre. If you look up one of your favorite musicians, chances are at one point or another in their career, they might have played one of our Dreadnought guitars. Thanks so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more Museum Moments episodes. See you again next time.